So welcome to this session with artificial intelligence and machine learning biological systems. It seems like controversy maybe to combine artificial intelligence and machine learning together with biological systems. How is our constructed realm dealing with the real deal? Let's explore with this wonderful assembly of panelists. So as we're starting to detach from the physical realm, all while training digital tools to learn from us, what may we learn from them? Let's give the screen, should I say, to Andrew Burrell. He is presenting Overground Understory, More Than Human Collaboration. Dr. Andrew Burrell is a practice-based researcher and educator exploring virtual and digitally mediated environments as a site for the construction, experience, and exploration of memory as a narrative. His process is one of wordling in virtual space, visualizing otherwise unseen connections and entanglements. Burrell's practice ranges from traditional academic research, exploring the creative potential for virtual environments, to visualize complex information relationships, to web XR-based immersive experiences and large-scale collaborative projects in virtual environments. He is exploring questions of the material, philosophical, and phenomenological aspects of virtual environments to form a deeper understanding of their intrinsic affordances. His practice is always framed by an underlying concern of developing ethical and sustainable methods for engaging with current and emerging technologies during a global climate crisis. So please welcome Andrew Burrell.
Thank you very much. Can I just get a confirmation you can see the screen sharing?
Yes, all good.
Excellent. Thank you. So I'd like to first of all acknowledge that I'm on the country of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and acknowledge that sovereignty of this land was never ceded. So sometime during the 2020 first COVID lockdown in Australia, I started working on a project with two life and environmental scientists, an environmental philosopher, and another critical design focused creative practitioner. The Urban Field Naturalist Project was the response to the need to find ways of connecting with the world around us at a moment when the world felt very much like things were shrinking. As part of this, we developed a few simple steps to becoming an urban field naturalist, namely slow down, observe, record and collect, ask questions and share. I propose here to extend these steps, using them to find a place within extended, more than human systems that exist in both the physical and digital, across multiple networks and ecologies. I also propose that creative practice is central to this. As a new media arts and critical design practitioner, I've always been interested in how technological ecologies and physical ecologies work together or don't work together as an important part of a more than human whole. At the same time, asking how creative practice may act in collaborations or in co-design processes with these systems. I'm also very interested in world building in virtual environments, where the term virtual environment has a broad definition, more akin to Deleuze's virtuality than a purely technological or contemporary construct. These few simple steps then allow me to bring my own domain knowledge to bear when trying to come to a deeper understanding of the ways these complex ecologies, networks, and systems operate. For example, without substantial retraining, I'm unable to fully grasp what's going on in this formula. But yet through creative practice, I'm able to approach this understanding in a different way. Overground Understory was commissioned by Runway Journal as part of the Assamic issue, and its creation centered around the residency at Bundanon in Now, Australia, a transitional rural bushland zone. One of the first things I thought about as a way into this research was some earlier experiments that I'd label translating the landscape. These experiments were taking advantage of some misbehaving pattern recognition in an image to text translation app, which led me to wonder how this anomaly might be used to investigate the possible misalignment of intent versus use, and how by observing these misfirings, I was able to start to see and translate patterns in the landscape myself. I was then able to begin to imagine how this particular machine reads the world. This imagining of invisible processes is central for me to understanding how complex digital and physical ecologies might operate by building a phenomenological model of them, which positions this understanding in what might be seen as being on the margins of awareness. This notion of being on the margins of awareness is important in my work. It helps to frame aspects of the hidden, misunderstood, forgotten, misremembered, and misappropriated. It also reminds me that my own complicated relationship with the country I live and work on. As a settler, this relationship is tempered by the fact that these are stolen lands, and my understanding them will always remain in the margins of awareness because of this. As I started to walk in the landscape, spending time in it and scanning, photographing, and recording it with an iPad, I was very much feeling I was in a process of dowsing or divining. In observing me in this process, Nancy Marrow Flood wondered if I was in a process of scrying. This brought to mind the reflective surface of the iPad as a mirror or portal becoming interface for seeing deeper into or through the membrane of these margins of awareness. I was slowing down to observe, record, and collect, following initially unseen pathways created by the more than human network ecologies, animal, vegetable, and mineral. And remembering that by default, humans are implicated in the more than human, an entangled yet decentered part of this network. Part of the process also involved looking for non-human mark making in the environment. For example, taking photos of the bark of the local stringy bark gum trees, and in doing so, creating a linguistic database of the local language of these trees. This was then processed as a data set to see how a machine might learn to reinterpret them using style transfer to retrain a model using StyleGAN2. You can see some of the outcomes here as images from the latent space produced through the generative adversarial networks, trying to reproduce the tree's bark language. I then wondered what the machine might see in these images in the latent space produced by the GAN. So I wrote a small script that used a relatively old MobileNet model. I asked MobileNet what it saw in the latent space of the bark language model. And we can see here that it showed text back to us as the text labels of what it saw, bringing me closer to an understanding through observations of a movement between forms, a translation or remodulation between data, image, text, language, physical, and virtual. I also have to wonder, are the patterns I begin to observe being trained in my own cognitive networks, changing the way I interpret my own sensory input? And all the while, I'm still following the non-human mark making in the physical world. The paths made by wombats, both overground and underground, became increasingly significant. I developed a fascination with the way the interface of the iPad screen and its attached sensors, camera, LiDAR, motion, enabled me to see a little inside their world, a world that I was not privy to as I spent my time on the overground. All of these elements started to become the material for thinking about world building together and in collaboration with the more than human. Which brings me to the question of what the few simple steps actually means in this space. How do we, as practitioners who critically engage with new media and wider ecologies, slow down, observe, record, collect, question, and share? Anyone who works with new and emerging technologies will understand the incredibly rapid speed at which they change. This is a speed we are unable to keep up with in any way that allows us to slow down and spend time with these technologies and critically understand what they mean for both our material practice and our place in a wider digital physical networked ecology. Sitting and spending time with processes that may not be considered cutting edge, but are nevertheless underexplored is one way of doing this. Creative practice can then become central to the ultimate question of just because we can, should we? These experiments provide ways for me to start to imagine how the more than human in the digital space, the machine, so to speak, are seeing, knowing, and understanding the network and ecologies they are part of, both physically and virtually. And ultimately remembering that these things don't actually see, know, or understand in any sense that we experience these words. Again, there's a whole lot more here and a whole lot more material practice that went into these experiments and continue to go into them that build these worlds. But for the moment, let me take you into one possible way of entering the poetic and reflective space of the overground understory. As the people here grow colder, I turn to my computer and spend my evening with it like a friend. I was loading a new program I'd ordered from a magazine. Are you lonely? Are you lost? This voice console is a must. I press execute. I walk. The night is not what I remember it to be, but in its reflection I see some forgotten things. In my hands, the dowsing rods and scrying screens. Again, in reflection, I divinate. Some things never known. Not that long ago, I went for a walk in the bush. In order to slow down and really look at the world around me, I focused just on the patterns that formed in the bark of the trees. I was looking for a secret Assamic language. I did not need to understand, just appreciate. Later, I returned with a camera to record some of the language and asked my computer what it saw. I press execute.
Agama. Boa constrictor. Constrictor. Ibex. Trilobite. Stone wall. Velvet. Maze.
Part 2. Pause to slow down. Breathe. Aware of your pause. Breathe. Underground. A short story about an animal walking in the dark and seeing a reflection in second person. You're walking through the darkness, your paws leaving soft imprints in the dewy grass. A sliver of moonlight illuminates your path ahead, and in the distance, you see a dark shape looming. As you get closer, you see that it's your own reflection in a still pond. You stop and stare at yourself for a moment, studying your own features in the water's surface. Then you continue on your way, leaving your reflection behind. Overground. A short story about an animal walking in the dark and seeing a reflection in second person. You walk through the darkness, your feet making soft crunching sounds on the ground. You see a faint light in the distance and you walk towards it. As you get closer, you see that the light is coming from a small pond of water. You stop and look at your reflection in the water. You can see the stars shining in your eyes and you feel peace and calm. New World. The final paragraph of a literary novel. The main characters are tree and wombat. They live to see the end of time. They each list things they remember the most. Tone is poetic and nostalgic. Tree stood in the field, its leaves rustling in the breeze. It was the last tree left on earth, and its branches were heavy with the weight of this knowledge. Wombat sat in the shade of the tree, and they too felt this weight. Tree and wombat saw the end of time coming, and they were content. They had lived a long and happy life together. They were the best of friends and nothing could ever come between them. Wombat remembered the time when Tree was just a sapling. Tree remembered the time when Wombat was just a baby. They both laughed and said they would never forget each other. I'm glad we got to see the end of time together, said Wombat. Me too, said Tree. Tree remembers the time when Wombat first came to sit under its branches. It was a sunny day and Wombat's fur was soft and warm. Wombat remembers the time when Tree first started to grow. It was a tiny sapling, but it had such potential. Tree remembers the time when Wombat first started to get old. Their fur was losing its luster. Their eyes became dull. Wombat remembers the time when Tree started to die. Its leaves turned yellow and then brown and started to sag. Tree and Wombat remember the time when they both died. They were the last two creatures left on Earth, and they died together, holding each other close. So what was it all for, Tree said? For us to be together. Yes, Wombat said. It was worth it, all the waiting. They were silent for a while, watching the stars. I'm glad we had this time together, Tree said. Me too, said Wombat. I will never forget it. I press execute. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That was a lovely, dreamy session to indulge in, and left me in this like in between space and kind of being very yeah, looking long distance forward and thinking that someday I'm gonna miss a lot of things. We have time for one question for Andrew before we need to try and catch up with some time. Do we have anyone with us who would like to pose a question for Andrew? No one is taking the word, so I introduced this with what may we learn from the digital tools. I'm guessing you have some thoughts on this after using this tool of sort of analyzing or kind of diving into your environment. What has it left you? What has it left you? What kind of experience have you gathered from it?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the main things it leaves, and you know, this isn't exclusive, that it does many things, but one of the most important things for me is it gives a point of reflection on ourselves. Like working with the generative machine learning models enables us in many ways to look back upon the ourselves and the spaces that these models have been generated from. So by reflecting on the outward looking world, looking out into the physical world, and then asking these models, do you see what I see? Are you reflecting on it in a similar way to what I am? Am I in some way trying to find myself as part of a larger system, I suppose, and finding out, you know, where you sit amongst that? And it is like a very large mirror, I suppose. And that's, you know, would be the main thing that I would say, among many that I would point out.
Yeah, in many ways, there could be another story there for the human and the machine instead of the wombat and the tree. Like, do you see what I see?
Yes, very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Andrew. Much appreciated. Sorry, just muted myself. We're going to go to our next presenter. We have Yuri with us, who will take us on a further dive into the digital landscape. Yuri Kuzmin is going to present Dwelling in a Synthetic Landscape, a parallax view of AI-generated landscapes in art. So I understand that this is also a collaboration with Dr. Varvara Gulyayeva. Yuri Kuzmin is an artist and researcher currently pursuing PhD studies in computational media and Arts at the Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. And Dr. Varvara Gulyayeva is an artist and researcher holding the position of assistant professor in computational media and arts at the Hong Kong University. Previously, she held positions at the Estonian Academy of Arts. Also, her PhD thesis, From Interaction to Post-Participation, the disappearing role of the active participant, which was defended in 2018 in Estonian Academy of Arts, was selected as the highest ranking abstract by Leonardo Labs in 2020. As an artist, she's working together with Mar Kane, forming an artist duo, Varvara and Mar. Often the duo's work is inspired by the information age. In their practice, they confront social changes and the impact of technological area. And the duo has been exhibiting international shows since 2009. And I'm sure Yuri can enlighten us more of his talk and how it is connected to the work of Gulyayeva. So please, Yuri, you are.
Yeah, so Varvara couldn't be here tonight, but yeah, so she's my PhD supervisor advisor, and she provided a lot of helpful feedback in the process of writing this preparing this little talk, and her artwork is used as a part of something like a case study in this thing. So let me share the screen. Right. So yeah, this talk, or this little text, went through some changes since I submitted the abstract, but so it ended up being way less conclusive as I thought it would be. But nevertheless, the subject matter and the sort of the problematic remains the same, and it's primarily concerned with the concept of landscape and the way this concept appears in AI-generated art or AI-generated representations of landscapes or landscapes themselves. So I begin with the book and the painting, and so the book is the Drought by J.G. Ballard, and so it's a science fiction novel. Its first title is Burning World, and it's a catastrophe novel in the sense that it describes a global planetary ecological catastrophe that leads to the breakdown of civilization, humanity, social structures, etc. And at the same time, it sort of traces the breakdowns of individual psyche of the protagonist. And the protagonist in this novel is described as ruminating on this painting by a French surrealist painter, Yves Tanguy, which is called Jour de lenteur, meaning lingering day or a day of slowness. So this is an important connection, because this surrealist painting sort of foreshadows the fate that awaits the world of this novel, and at the same time serves as this mental anchor for the protagonist of the novel. And yeah, unsurprisingly, it's a landscape, a kind of alien landscape inhabited by weird, inhuman, alien creatures. And one thing that a lot of the analysis of this work point out is the sort of and works by Tanguy in general, is the sort of the dilation of time, or like a very present temporality of this specific surrealist landscape. And this question of temporality of a landscape is something that we will return to in a little bit. And the second part of the same novel, which takes place in the aftermath of this the drought, when the remnants of humanity inhabit a former seafloor, now a desert consisting of salt and brine, which was a byproduct of mass-scale desalination aimed to rectify and fix the lack of drinking water, which happens during this catastrophic drought. So the remaining humans are forced to chase after the receding sea, like as it recedes further away from the shoreline. And in doing so, they form temporary alliances. They construct transient social structures, and they adopt specific patterns of dwelling, new patterns of dwelling that are response to this, the environment, the landscape that they now have to inhabit. So the setting of this chapter and the imagery that Ballard invokes is very reminiscent, or basically it is precisely what Kate Crawford describes in her book Atlas of AI, the specific type of landscape that she calls the landscape of computation. So in this in the first chapter of her book, she describes a journey through lithium extraction facilities in Bolivia, and notes how this metaphor of mining, data mining, and stuff like that has its concrete mineralogical layer or dimension. So another connection is the Franco-Canadian artist Gregory Chitonsky's work, which is called Lithium, and is part of the Infinite Landscape series. So the work points out the connection between lithium as this sort of a critical mineral to the computation and modern technology and technoscience in general, and this other prominent use of lithium as a mood stabilizer, as a medication and way of treatment, bipolar disorders, depressions, and other mental issues. So he's drawing the attention to this fact that both humans and machines can be dependent on the same thing, on the same material or mineral, and at the same time connecting the mental and environmental devastation that is that follows lithium, yeah, to come back to the temporality of landscape. So this is one notion or a concept that British anthropologist Tim Ingold, whose work is mostly concerned with the relations between humans and their environments, and this is the thing that he's been writing about and working on since the early 90s, 1993, and his essay Temporality of Landscape. And he's been updating and expanding this concept up to this day. So for Ingold, and not just him, but many other philosophers, thinkers, artists, the main problem is this split, the separation between nature and culture. And so this separation produces a worldview where nature or land or environment becomes a background, a passive background of human activity. And by separating, by creating this kind of like a figure ground dynamic, a lot of confusion happens, a lot of confusion issues. So that's the thing with the landscape is it sort of, so it becomes the figure for the ground of nature or the land, and therefore it's considered as a cultural construct, or as panorama, as an object of contemplation, as a repository of meanings, of legibility, of effect, etc., etc. And so, in order to rectify this this confusion, Ingold attempts to, so he formulates this idea of a taskscape, of a landscape as a continual evolving process, or a multiplicity of processes. So there are tasks performed by human and non-human agents that that operate in the landscape, and by contemplating, by looking, by watching the landscape, the observer has a possibility to sort of be guided by the landscape, if it makes sense. So like it be guided through this narrative, through this historicity of effort that took place in creating this landscape, and like everything and everyone that dwells or dwelt in it. So this idea of taskscape is sort of pitted against this culturalistic view of a landscape, as which frames it as a kind of a monument, a frozen, immutable thing that loses this continual, evolving, temporal quality. And to approach this taskscape concept, Ingold adopts what he calls a dwelling perspective, which is a kind based on Martin Heidegger's essays. One, building, dwelling, thinking, dwelling, building, thinking. Another is poetically, The Man Dwells, which is a sort of a rumination on Hölderlin's poem. And the argument of Heidegger is this, that dwelling and building are related, and they're basically more or less the same. And so he traces it in the etymology of the word in German language specifically. But for example, this etymology, this linguistic connection is still present in the word, in an English word, neighbor, for example. So a neighbor is a sort of a co-dweller and a co-builder. So yeah, basically dwelling and thinking are more related than one would think. And yeah, so this is the sort of the dwelling perspective that that could be applied to landscapes. And the point of this, the question that I would like to ask is whether this dwelling perspective can be applied to a landscape that were generated from nothing, or from data sets from existing data. So what would dwelling in synthetic landscapes would look like, and what kind of lessons can we learn from that, or like what kind of patterns of activity, what kind of processes can be inferred from those landscapes? And here are some of the artworks that engage with this idea, and or could be interpreted through this line of thinking. So Varvara Guleva and Mara Kanesula postcard landscapes from Lanzarote, which is again, so it's like a two GAN generated videos, working with the two data sets of images taken at the same place, which is Lanzarote and the Canary Islands. And one is taken, I'll play it again. One is taking the images labeled with the words landscape, and so more of a nature photography and landscape and like representations of landscapes of this place. And another is more concerned with sort of like touristic activities, like touristic patterns and like touristic scopic regime, I guess you could call it. So it's sort of a, yeah, kind of like a juxtaposition of this more like, as artists themselves consider this, like one is the sort of presenting this like real nature as it is, which is and the other is sort of like more anthropocentric, more touristic activities and patterns and visual consumption. So yeah, the question is whether by adopting this sort of like dwelling perspective, we can gain any new insights from this work or some others. Like, for example, here I was trying to move away from the sort of a Western tradition of landscape representation and the engagement with the environment, and like thinking more in terms of Shanshui and Chinese landscape painting, which is non-ocular originally, so it doesn't have the sort of Cartesian perspective, doesn't have a horizon or a vanishing point, and it's a sort of and the way of appreciation a Shanshu painting would be also different. So it's a good painting is not mimetic, it's supposed to resonate. So sort of like eye resonating with the heart, which is a category of Chinese philosophy and like aesthetic thinking. And some works that employ machine learning or AI and sort of engage with the aesthetics of Shanshui would be Evan Zhou's Walking Through Shanshui, which is an illustration or playing with this idea of a moving observer. So as you know, some Shanshu paintings are very long scrolls, and it's sort of it's like a film, like unfolded film. So kind of like a frame by frame panoramic view that is not, wouldn't be feasible with the sort of like Cartesian perspectivalist perspective. And so this work does exactly that, and the sort of the movement of the audience. It's a interactive installation. The movements of the audience are transformed into those scrolls. It's not very clear from the images that I chose, but the sort of like the mobile perspective that results in like certain configurations of of materials and of environment are this idea is present in this work. And another work by Emily Pelicano called Re-enchanting Gis, which is a sort of an attempt to overcome the insufficiency of the sort of like geographic modeling. So she's working with the aftermath of the Fukushima disaster in Japan, and so using style transfers to create this vivid imagery, and GPT-2 model to create a sort of a companion poetry. And she's also using the same idea of a unfolding scroll, so like a very Shanshui kind of like a multi perspective view. So this is one way to look at it. And then there's some NFTs, some generative artworks by Refik Anadol, which are more of this, I guess, more of a traditional traditional Western representation of the landscape and art. But yeah, the point here was more about the way of distributing those pictures. So as NFTs, would they sort of like fare better if they not criticize or like critically engage with this sort of like idea of a landscape or like a culturalistic view of landscape, but sort of like play more into the expectations. So basically reinforcing this the existing worldview. And to conclude this short presentation, yeah, there are two like quite provocative quotes that I chose that were sort of leading up to the like open-ended questions that I was thinking of. So one is the sort of the one is the quote from Gregory Chudonsky, whose work I've mentioned before. And so again, it sort of like brings up the issues of this nature-culture divide and the spatial conquest and the sort of like subjugation of the earth, subjugation of the environment, and then the sort of landscape as a plastic thing that could be designed. It could be imbued with certain meanings. It could be used to utilitarian or satisfy utilitarian or aesthetic or political concerns. Or yeah, something whether something is missing in this formula, and whether this those AI generated landscapes can provide some insights into what exactly is missing. And then another quote is from Mario Klingemann, who's a very well-known AI artist, which is kind of a yeah, generative art is the landscape painting of the 21st century. So quite a provocative statement, and like also makes us think of this problem, whether the existing models are really potent instruments, or like if those, basically how do we treat those the technology? So is it a tool? Is it a collaborator? Is it some sort of like a sympathetic resonance? What is the outcome of this of the practice? Is it some like kitsch, or is it high effort memes, as one recent article calls it? So yeah, these are the kind of questions that that we're facing, and the sort of like the central question to this, the whole talk would be yeah, the possibility of sort of like reading or like inferring some patterns or practices or processes from the landscapes that were generated with AI. And another even more speculative dimension to that would be the sort of the so if we adopt a dwelling perspective, who would be dwelling in those landscapes, and yeah, what those dwellers look like, for example. And that sort of brings us back to the Yves Tanguy painting. So like his landscapes are populated by those strange metallic creatures, and yeah, who knows what other AI generated landscapes would be inhabited with. And that's it.
Thanks a lot, Yuri. I thought the movement you took us through with both Bailard and Tanguy, with the painting and then drawing it into our time, is it was a very interesting travel to make with you. Does anyone have a question for Yuri? No? No one will get to ask all the questions today. I'm a lucky gal. I kind of find myself thinking that it seems like this, I kind of read this separation of nature, and that we are constructing some kind of, I don't know, could I call it like dreamy landscapes? But which, yes, they are very seductive and dreamy, but what about the nightmares in there? Are we completely blind to see the nightmares, or do we just play around with the tools and kind of neglect to look at the dark sides?
Maybe something that I was thinking of is that it's hard to have nightmares. So nightmares are highly mediated or determined by the sort of like the whole visual culture, cinema, and video games, and painting and such. So the real horrors are, I don't even know. They're present, but maybe they're not as, the allure is not quite there.
Yeah, we can just leave it there. I just wanted to post it out because it seems like we do have some blindsightedness too. That is actually very interesting to look into. But let's move on. We have 2 more presenters. We are pressed on time, so let's get this moving. We're having a next presenter is Oksana. So with digital tools analyzing our biological systems and ecological systems is one of our topics for our next presentation. Oksana will be talking about analytical instruments for audiovisual translation of metabolomics merging genotype and environment regarding climate changes. And Dr. Oksana is a leading researcher of New Technologies Department, Modern Art Research Institute of Ukraine. She's the author of the book, The Interaction of Architectural Spaces, Contemporary Art and New Technologies. And she's a curator for International Festival of Social Sculpture in Kiev. She studied art in Kiev, followed by a PhD at the Amsterdam University, Banff Center in Canada, Bauhaus Dessau, Germany, and Fulbright Research Program at UCLA in the States. She's been exhibiting worldwide, from MoMA to German History Museum in Berlin, to MCA in Skopje, to Digital Media Valencia in Spain. She exhibited in EDAF in, I think that is in Madrid, and Ars Electronica also in Linz this year. Please welcome Oksana.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Can you hear me, and can you see my screen actually?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see the screen.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So I would like to approach metabolomics because this topic was developed within the IMERA. IMERA, it's an Institute for Advanced Study of Aix-Marseille University, actually last year, and I approached this topic with the research dealing with the environment, looking at cyanobacteria and the issue of this blowing of the water, this green stuff. But in Marseille University, Aix-Marseille University, they didn't develop this idea because in Mediterranean Sea there is no cyanobacteria, there is no algae bloom. the Institute of Biodiversity and Ecology, they focused on the other issue, and one of them were metabolomics. Metabolomics is a really new technology which is dealing with the is functioning as a fingerprints for processing occurring in living cells, and it's useful for understanding of functioning of biodiversity and as a biomarkers of effects of environmental changes. It means that it combined the genetic actually information we can see on this schema, metabolomics here, and genome and DNA relation, and the influence of the environmental changes and the influence of the climate changes on the genome, on this DNA actually information. And it's a new technology which has recently started to grow, and it's very interesting to deal with. This Institute of the Biodiversity and Ecology and the actually the group which I work with, Thierry Perez, is focusing on the sponge. Also because the sponge is very sensitive to the climate changes and to the changes of the environment, and it's become to be sick, and it's visible. So you can pick up those changes from the visual state of the species, but metabolomics, it gives the perspective of these changes in an invisible way, because it's just data. And I also work with the Mediterranean Institute of Oceanography, trying to get the microscopy video and microscopic material. Also because they're focusing on the also this type of environmental changes with the Moby Dick program, which is research the changes of the food, and also the plankton, because plankton, it's a food for different oceanic species, but at the same time, it's oxygen producers. And so the changes of CO2 and the changes with the climate change, when the some species can disappear, and so it will provoke the changes for the bigger species whom they serve as a food web, etc. And it's very interesting in this case, this research. So I used those photography printed on the transparent for the exhibition, which was actually supported by the Hallows of Europe to be presented in June of 2022. So this year in Kiev, in new space of the title Collider, because I had possibility to use different spaces and approach this topic of metabolomics and this topic of the environmental changes, building different type of the installation. And I try to use those imagery to build as a mobile, but as a more 20th century type of installation, immersive space. When the people can come inside with the dynamic light on those imagery, and you can see the shadow of those plankton species as disappearing species, and you can see yourself with your shadow also as a potential futuristic view that you can be also part of this disappearing world. So this type of idea, but the project was scheduled for June, and in February we got this literally splintered reality. So grant was cancelled, exhibition was cancelled, culture was cancelled, and life was cancelled. And so I've been invited back by IMERA Institute to continue with this research, but actually the project itself didn't happen as a immersive journey through this different type of space with different type of approach, trying to bring the information about metabolomic data and this relation to the eco data. And so from time to time, I still have the possibility to present some part of this project, and I'm using this possibility, but it's not the whole project that could be presented this June. So this really splintered reality for us as Ukrainians and for art and for the project as well. But dealing with the metabolome, it's kind of complicated technology to measure the metabolome, because this is molecular. It should be separated. To separate, there are like couple of technology using liquid chromatography, gas chromatography, and the NMR spectroscopy and mass spectrometry are also serving to measure metabolome. So as you can see, nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy, it's quite kind of very complicated machine to receive this data. And so this is mass spectrometry equipment. And this is mass spectrometry together with gas chromatography. So there are like different type of equipment. And this is the schematic representation, how it works. Using chromatography techniques of separation and mixture, you can see the chromatography can be visually represented. And I'm trying to use this representation for the art that can show this data as well. So this machine is available. It's much less fancy than those that I presented previously. The first one was in UK, this one in Marseille in Biodiversity and Ecology Institute. And so upon those data, the scientists, they build this kind of representation with those peaks. And those peaks are speaking about kind of stress that the molecular or the spicy experience caused by climate and different changes. And so we approach the sonification of those data in different type of approach. So this approach was based on the on the physical parameter of nuclear magnetic resonance spectroscopy itself. And this is the explanation by Ramamurthy, who did this research. He's mostly mathematician, involved his also mathematical students to build the sonification of the molecular structure. There is another type of approach, the sonification of metabolomics using chemical characteristics. And here we can see different formula which were translated into the sound. This is like amine, benzene, codeine. According to this formula, structure and relation between the elements. So this is actually how the molecular can, how molecular can think. And this is the representation written by notes and by graphical representation. Here with the QR code, you can go exactly to this sound, and this is like formula representation of the molecular. And what is interested me also not only to have this scientific approach toward like molecular signification, but this is the example of the translation from the chemical molecular to sound, and the attempt from like sound created to translate it into chemistry and to create the molecular. So this was idea from those researchers. It didn't work literally, but this idea was already kind of tested. This is summarizing methodology, how those data can be represented. So here you can see just as a numbers, as a data itself, as a graphical representation with those peaks of the stress actually. And it's also, you see it's like fingerprints. This is the heat map, and heat map also can be used as a like piano, and this is more this is a chemical like network representation, and this is more like spatial structure. And so here the analysis of different spongy in Marseille with this heat map, different type, also the research of the sick sponge and the healthy sponge. And you see that the certain difference in those peaks. And our idea was also try to significate this information and to see how like with the sun it can be differentiated. Also, this is like heat map, and you see this keyboard of piano, like regarding this heat map. Also, the research with real diving in with the research and structure of the cave here in Marseille. I want probably to show a bit of the this video, because here it's involved the sound produced upon those peaks that you saw on the graphical representation. And here it's a diving research into the cave. A cave is a research as a real model for biodiversity, because from the very beginning of like entering, it's very rich biodiversity there. And then when you go deeper or further, it's become to be less rich, and it's kind of become to be poor representation of the biodiversity. So it's very useful model to explore it on the place. So this is another type of space which were like planned to present. It's a like virtual environment. And those spicy who are living there, also we had chance to present it within the hybrid art in Port the book. And I would like to show you the small fragment, because here involved the sound of the healthy sponge and the sick sponge, and it were also added with the voices. So this was the attempt to vocalize those spices. Visually, you can see how disappeared those plankton from the ocean. So this is also different approach to sonificate visual material from this diving, and also using this kind of parabola, whose representation of this metabolomics data. And as you can see, there is possibility from this schema, certain recovery for this spicy, but there is like point of the selective mortality. And so this is explicatory actually schema. And I wanted to use all those physical and chemical possibility to bring this metabolomics data into the space, like using the spectroscopy or bioluminescence from the underwater spicy, and to build this from data-driven installation of the metabolomics to move probably toward the metabolomics opera, where those spices can be sonificated, because like every molecular or different spices can be sonificated with this metabolomics data, and it become to be chorus or even opera. So like project kind of becoming the ocean that we are all together, not human beings separate from the underwater life, but together. And in a way, it's an approach also using the AI. I will tell you just a few words closing, because what I'm interested in to bring this data into the space, in a way it's an approach of Xenakis, like building the architecture and building this data sonificated back to the space, and also with the reference to Leonardo, who built this Viola Organista and developed the mathematical fractal structure and painted in a way this space in Milan. And so this is the last short representation of this. this kind of short overview of this project with the some changes to present it as a splintered realities as well. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Oksana. Sorry to nudge you so many times about time, but yeah, it was really, really enjoyable presentation, and kind of makes me think how you are dwelling and building the language from the nature and into your artistic practice. Thank you so much for indulging us in that. We're gonna now make room for the last presenter, Elke Reinhuber. She will look at how digital tools might mobilize otherwise fixed entities of our world, and will present her Conformi-3 presentation. Reinhuber is a media artist, researcher, and educator who teaches currently at the School of Creative Media, City University of Hong Kong. She's an associate professor at the Expanded Photography. Reinhuber is imagining a life on the holodeck to explore alternative realities with ease. She immersed herself for the first time in panoramic photographies that she prepared for a 360 degrees environment. And the trained photographer realized that her medium was finally no longer constricted by the limitations of the frame. So in her work, she explores different modes of presentation and strategies of storytelling to emphasize the parallel existence of multiple truths and correlations between decisions and emotions. So please, Elke, take the floor.
Yes, thank you, Heike Tapio, for the kind introduction. Oksana, would you mind stopping to share the screen that I can share mine? That would be great.
Just a moment.
So it was a very interesting session so far. I really enjoyed it, and I will end today with a little bit lighter presentation. It is basically a project still in progress, in the making, and it is, I would say, a personal artistic project which I developed during the period here in Hong Kong, during the COVID restrictions. Oksana, how are we going? There is
I'm kind of having problem to stop it. Where to?
At the bottom, there should be a rectangular thingy saying usually share the screen, and now you should be able to stop the screen there. Can you do that?
Yeah, this is I have the problem with. Can the technique in RIXC help me, please?
I think we will get some assistance now shortly. Sorry about that.
Yes, please.
Okay. So it doesn't make so much sense to start speaking because I have mainly images which I would like to share and over which I will be speaking. But I can let you know already that, great, thank you, here we go. So.
Sorry for that.
No worries, all good. So I believe you can see my screen right now. So I'm talking about a project, Conformi-3, and it is basically an observation which I had during my time here in Hong Kong. I started working in Hong Kong last year in January, and I am a photographer by background, working also with media art. Heike Tapio explained that already. Before I moved to Hong Kong, I spent the last 7 years in Singapore, also researching and teaching there at the NTU University, the School of Creative Media. And basically, during the COVID time in Singapore, I felt really trapped. It is quite a small island. And after being there a year, basically confined, I couldn't leave, no one could come. I decided I follow that appointment, the offer to Hong Kong. And what happened? Surely, I started with 21 days hotel quarantine. And it didn't get much better, so no one could come and visit me, but I also really enjoyed the time there in the emptiness. It was really quiet, and I think it was quite a special period of time in Hong Kong, and without tourists basically, and also, yeah, very quiet and peaceful. Just checking, you can see my other slides. Yeah, good. So then earlier this year, the situation changed in Hong Kong. We had a really high peak in with COVID cases, and with this, a lot of shops and eateries closed. This is Nathan Road in the afternoon, which is really normally totally crowded, and a lot of shop owners had to give up. Shops were for lease, they were empty. You see everything closed. Also, the eateries, it didn't go well anymore. They all had to close by 6 p.m. There were a lot of restrictions. I know it was everywhere, but this is just now my personal observation. Every now and then you saw someone on the street, and quite often people were wondering where their shop they were went to. So they just disappeared. Even the post office closed, and Hong Kong's legendary Star Ferry ceased operation for a while, going to Central. I think the main one still operate Wan Chai. I think the Central still operated very irregularly. And I started just walking around in the cityscape, and I really enjoyed looking at the trees. They were so much a symbol of the nature in the city, but also of the confinement we had. Trees, I think they have a very special role here in Hong Kong, generally in Asian cultures. They often are connected to religious rituals or locations. And very often you see how they are spreading around. This one is covering a stone with an inscription. And what I find very interesting is that the trees also have a QR code. And you can get some more information about most of the trees, which you find, they all have a unique number. And looking that tree up here, for instance, we have the Chinese banyan tree. And you can get quite a bit of information. There's also a registry for old and valuable trees. So the trees are all kind of acknowledged. Again, I find it really interesting how they are spreading out in their limited urban environment, but also how they are supported and protected. And here, for instance, you see how the fence is built around the tree. The tree is kind of merging with the fence, similar example here. And they're often trying to escape their confinement, protected by other suggestions. And it's also quite unique to see these wall trees everywhere in the city. And trees are really a kind of growing on very steep walls. And so these are a few examples. And you really see how they're trying to make the best out of their confined spaces and spread around, grow as good as possible. So, but specifically this confinement was what I found really interesting, how the trees are trapped in their spaces and trying to escape, but also break their boundaries. And at the same time, we see how they're limited to their space and how they still grow, bloom, and have a really large flourishing canopy. Some have to be cut off because they were expanding a bit too much. And now we come to the ones which I found most interesting, which are really in the cityscape, in the urban environment, confined to kind of geometric shapes, square and triangular shapes. Again, they are making use of the space they have. They're still trying to expand. Some have the privilege that the environment gets adjusted to their needs, not all of them. So starting with this observation, I was trying to shape trees myself, but I realized I'm not patient enough. It just takes too long to cultivate my little trees. And I went back to my roots. I was trained as an industrial photographer working with large format cameras, and went out, started taking black and white images of the trees. A very meditative, rewarding process, which I really enjoyed, and took several pictures. But I also realized they don't do justice to this sculptural quality of the trees at all. So I took a few stereoscopic images, anaglyph. You get a better idea, a better sense of the depth of the spatial dimension of the tree, but still it is not the same as looking at the real tree. Then I recalled I did 2 years ago a virtual reality experience. It's called Garden of Changes, looking at the forking path structure in one of Singapore's garden, which got refurbished. And I was working there with tree assets. But in the beginning, I was actually scanning the trees. And they're quite unique tree trunks. And a lot of these trees were felled and had to be removed. So me and my team, we were capturing a lot of these trees with hundreds of images, working with photogrammetry. So that was in 2018. We did that all manually. And then I realized now it is so easy to do that with the mobile phone. There are a lot of different apps. I tried, I think most or all, maybe all of them, which were available for my type of phone. And many of them mainly focus on creating point clouds, but that was not really what I wanted to do. I wanted to get a proper structure of the tree and also be able to modify it later on in a 3D application and get a good texture. So I ended in the end with working with a 3D scanner, and did a lot of tests. I spare you now with the details, and started scanning the trees. Quite an interesting work with a 3D scanner. It is quite fast, just setting the right settings. And you get a very good representation, also up to scale of the tree trunk. And the texture, the model, and then also, yeah, basically together the textured result. And with this, I was quite satisfied, exploring a bit further into the possibilities. Well, as I say, I skipped that. So my final outcome for this project is basically the black and white photography, which I still keep doing because every now and then I find another unique tree. And they serve basically as the marker for then the scanned tree. I hope you see the video now rotating. So in this way, this tree really becomes mobilized. You can see that in its sculptural quality, also in other locations, not only in the original place, in the original spot of the tree. And at the moment, I have about 20 trees captured and scanned. And basically, yes, that's what I wanted to share about this current process, current project in process. And just to end with, I mainly looked at the Chinese banyan tree. There are also other trees, for instance, the flame tree. And when you look closer at these trees, they also try to expand, but they really need the deep roots. And just last month, there was this accident happening with a tree actually collapsing out of the small confinement which the tree had. And immediately there was an action looking at the other trees in the same street. So these flame trees are not ideal for the small confined space, and immediately, yeah, they got removed. And yeah, so that is so far very quickly my current personal artistic research, and I would like to thank you for your attention and wrap it up. So I sped up to save a little bit of time for you.
Thank you so much, Erke. Really enjoyed the visual journey of experiencing the trees. I really do understand why you got so fascinated by them when they really were growing into the architecture. It was really fascinating to see. So we made it to the end of our panel today. Thank you so much for all your lovely presentations. I think we made a journey from the embodied indigenous knowledge and creating things out of thin air to how we have been separated from nature and culture, and how we are trying to build a new language with machine learning maybe, and how we are escaping the physical. Maybe we are escaping because the bio-related problem is becoming too difficult to relate with. I don't know. But I really enjoyed all the talks today. Thank you so much. And yeah, I hope you will enjoy the rest of the program that we have today.